This week's episode is another non-paranormal, true scary situation stories. But what saved some of the original posters from these situations could be something beyond our reason and logic. What Koreans would commonly call a 감 or 촉. Both words means literally a feel, but in this context, more correct translation would be a gut feeling. Modern society has made our life somewhat safe and predictable, but if you wind back our human history and imagine yourself as a caveman, the moment you walk out of your cave, you might get hit by a rock falling down, bitten by a snake on the field, or attacked by a tiger jumping out from the bush. 'Cause our world and nature are by all means neither logical nor benign. So, from the tough evolutionary past, we have developed the so-called gut feeling, something you just know beyond rational or logical analysis. Even though the world has become much more predictable and regulated, there could always be an unexpected danger. A burglar eyeing on our home, or a madman targeting you for no good reason, as in today's stories. And facing such an unexpected event, we could only hope a sheer luck or our incredible gut feeling save our day. So, here are 6 allegedly true stories from Korea about people who experienced a close call case. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. My mother ran a hair salon when I was young. Business wasn't great. Maybe her skill wasn't great. There was only sporadic flow of clients at best, and Mom was often away to chat away with the owners of other shops on the street. I was in charge to hang around in the shop watching TV and to call Mom in when a client should come. One early evening, it must have been well before 7 as Dad wasn't back home from work yet. My younger brother was sleeping in the back room adjacent to the shop, and I was, as usual, watching my favorite anime on TV, reenacting the moves of its characters. The sliding door of the shop opened. There was a man in a white shirt, black trousers. Overall, he looked ordinary and harmless, but I got an odd vibe. His hair looked still too short to seek a cut or a perm, and the newspaper rolled up under his armpit. "Hello, sir," I greeted regardless. The guy smiled and asked, "Hi, is your mom in?" I couldn't remember ever seeing his face around in this small town, and his eyes? Even while talking to me with a smile, his eyes were rolling busily around the shop. I thought to run out and fetch Mom, but I was worried about brother sleeping in the room too. So I shouted towards the back room. "Dad, there's a client. I'm gonna go and fetch Mom in." The man stopped me from going out and said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll come back later," and went away. I locked the shop door behind him and spied the outside anxiously, waiting for Mom. She came back not long after, but didn't seem to pay much attention to my story about this strange man earlier. I was a bit miffed, so retreated to the back room and opened my homeworks. Then loud sirens rang right outside on our street. Mom went out to see what was happening, and I quickly joined. There were a whole team of police cars, ambulances, and a crowd of people in front of the video rental shop just a few shops down from us. The details we learned only next day. Apparently the rental shop was robbed, and the owner of the shop, a middle-aged woman and one of my mom's usual chit-chat buddies, was stabbed to death. Her son was also present in the shop at the time, but the murder took place while he was gone upstairs to have dinner. Upon learning the details, Mom took me to the police station. That murderer was at my shop too, while my daughter was keeping the shop alone. He apparently took a round tour to the shops on the street, and other people's description indeed matched what I saw. On the way back from the police, Mom asked me, "How did you come up with an idea to pretend Dad was home?" "I don't know. I just felt it dangerous," was my answer. Mom kept her business for another 5 years there, but the murderer was not caught to the end. One evening when I was 19, our family dinner was disturbed by the doorbell. Nobody was expecting anybody or delivery so late in the day. I went to the door and asked, "Who is it?" No reply. I checked through the peephole on the door, but it was totally black. Even if it was some kid pranking, the motion detecting lamp should have been still on in the corridor. It was obviously somebody deliberately blocking the hall. Being a teenager with a short temper I was then, I shouted who was blocking the hall and kept ringing the bell, with rough swear words in between. The rest of the family also came to the hallway to see what was going on, but whoever outside was kept banging the bell. My dad got annoyed too and was about to open up the door to confront. But I felt something wasn't right. It was too bold and persistent to be a kid's prank. So I stopped him and persuaded him to ignore it and go back to the table. Following day, we heard all the commotions with the police officers roaming in and out of our floor. Apparently, our neighbor a couple of doors down was murdered. The perpetrator lured him to open the door with a persistent banging of the doorbell and stabbed him as soon as the door was opened. It turned out our neighbor was having an affair with a married woman and the murderer was her husband. But at first, he misread the apartment number and rang our door instead. I don't want to think what might have happened if I didn't stop Dad then. Back in 2004, my family owned a two-storied house in Daegu. It housed 4 individual flats, 2 on each floor. My family occupied a flat on the ground floor. In October, a young couple with a baby moved into the first floor flat. As usual, it was on 2-year contract with 12 million won deposit, about $10,000. From what I gathered, the husband was jobless and they lived on wife's income. At first, they seemed quiet, but not quite into the first month, we started hearing the couple arguing with each other constantly. Into the 3rd month of the tenancy, the husband came to us and asked the deposit back as they were moving out. He claimed to have found a cheaper place with a 10 million deposit. On my parents' part, they had already invested in redecorating and renovating the flat for the couple, and it would cost another dealer fee to find another tenant. So they proposed to return 2 million to match his new offer. But the husband would not hear it and insisted on moving out. My parents got upset and told him to do as he liked, but they could return the deposit only when they found a new tenant. And indeed, the couple moved out in 3 days, and from the day one, they nagged us to return the deposit. One day the husband visited, next the wife, her parents, and even their grandmother knocked on our door in turn. For my parents, it was the couple who broke the contract and stayed firm with their term that they could not give the deposit back until they find a new tenant. About 2 weeks passed. The insistent visit from the couple and their family stopped. Maybe they got tired too? That evening our family went to dine out and came back well past 9 p.m. Our flat was a mess, clearly broken in and burgled. On top of that, in the middle of my parents' room was a knife with blood stains. We were all stunned and panicking when somebody rang our door. It was police officers. Apparently somebody witnessed somebody walking into the house with a knife in his hand and reported it promptly. Next day, a woman visited us, claiming to be the sister of the wife. She asked if the brother-in-law didn't visit us the previous day. We didn't know about that, but indeed found the house broken in and bloody knife in the room. The woman broke in tears and started apologizing. Previous day, the young couple got on arguing despite of the presence of the sister. The husband beat his wife for she was not willing to keep nagging for the deposit, and as if that wasn't enough, he took a knife from the kitchen and stabbed her in the neck and belly. And then he ran out saying he was going to kill his former landlord. Us. The sister of the wife called us as soon as her wounded sister was hospitalized, but could not reach us, so she alerted the police. When police traced the husband down, they found him having stabbed himself in the neck. Fortunately, both the husband and the wife survived, and the husband was prosecuted for an attempted murder and trespassing. Regardless, my parents got so scared and promptly took a loan to give back the deposit. It still gives me a chill if we had not dined out that evening. I lived in the same town my whole life, so I am well acquainted virtually everybody from the similar age group, as we all attended the same local primary, middle and high school. It happened in my freshman year. I got a call from a mate from high school, let's call him Chosu. We weren't exactly personal friends, but as I mentioned, we all kept contacts among schoolmates living in the same small town and picked it up casually. I just expected him to suggest to gather up with other mates for a drink or something. Chosu's voice was low.
Let me be straight. I hear you calling my name behind my back. Is that true?
He said. I was honestly baffled. We weren't that close and I had no business to talk about him at all, so I just plainly said that I didn't.
But my friends told me that you did, calling me a hypocrite.
Chosu insisted. I stood my ground and asked who those friends were. They must have been mistaken with somebody else, if any. Chosu sounded unconvinced, but we ended the call with him apologizing. Following day, I met up with a friend and was on my way back home when I got a message from Chosu that he was waiting at the local metro station and that he'd like to see me. It was on the way home, so I agreed. I was shocked to see how he changed. I remembered Chosu as a bright and bubbly character, but he looked now gaunt and all frowned up. His glare at me was so angry I felt almost afraid to look at him straight. He kept accusing me of backstabbing him. I calmly explained it wasn't true at all, and my friend, who was also a friend to Chosu, defended me that I wasn't such a character. Only then Chosu smiled as he used to and apologized once again. Thought that was that, until I got a message from him when I got home.
I still can't trust you. I take back my apology.
In the following days, Chosu kept pestering me with calls and messages, occasionally calling me by some disgusting names. He apparently asked around all the mates from our high school if I wasn't talking nasty of him. I only learned it when some of them called me to ask what was up between me and Chosu. One day I was badly ill. I had to skip my lecture and spent the whole day in bed. I was woken up by a call from Cheolsu. He said he was sorry and would like to see me. I told him I was unwell and couldn't that day, but Cheolsu kept insisting it had to be that day. He would visit me if I couldn't come out. I wasn't myself with high fever and couldn't deal with it anymore, so just told him some other time and hung up. Cheolsu went silent for some time, so I assumed it was all over finally. Then a friend called me.
Did you hear about Cheolsu? He killed his mother.
I couldn't believe it until I read the news report on the internet myself. He stabbed his mother 17 times. I was dumbfounded for a long time because I could not but imagine what might have happened if I agreed to see him that night. Later the friend passed on more details. That Cheolsu followed his mom out onto the street, who was then already stabbed and bleeding, and finished her off to the shock and horror of the passerbys. Apparently, he had been gone strange quite some time by then, following and stalking not just me but some other mates and even some strangers. He couldn't tell his imagination from the reality anymore and talked to imaginary people in his mind. The last thing I know about Cheolsu is that he was sent to a facility for the criminally insane. This incident left me depressed for a time afterwards. Four years ago, I was in the last year of high school. As typically is for any student in that year, it was a daily routine that I came back home from school well past 11 at night. But that night, I came back to an empty home because both my parents had to attend a family business. I went to bed soon after a shower, but I woke up again with my tummy rumbling. Geez, a call of nature at 2 in the morning. When I got out of the bathroom after the business, suddenly the light came on in the hallway. The light there was on motion detection, and I was nowhere near to trigger it. But anyway, the sight of the front door reminded me that I didn't lock it up. Again. I tend to forget to lock the door up. Mom's numerous smashing on my back for this carelessness didn't quite fix that habit, and I overlooked it once again that night. I locked it up and checked my parents' room too, just in case they might be back, and went back to bed. Before I could fall asleep again, I heard rattling noises from the front door. My room was right next to it, so I could hear it clearly. Were my parents back? But if that were the case, they would be just using their key. I walked out the front door, but before I could say, "Who is it?" I heard somebody saying from the other side of the door.
"Shit, it's locked." "Really? You said you saw they don't lock it."
I did. I saw the daughter leaving the door unlocked.
Bad luck. Would have been an easy one. Come, let's try some other time.
Voices of two men, probably about middle age, were whispering. I just froze stuck there, and only when I heard their footsteps moving away, dropped on the floor, shivering all over. Clearly the burglars had been targeting my home and been observing my behavior for some time. I told what happened as soon as my parents were back the following day, and they reported it to the police. Fortunately, the two burglars were caught a few days later while attempting to break into yet another flat. They were known criminals already on the wanted list. The police told us that they came across me not locking the door by chance and been watching our flat. It goes without saying the incident fixed my carelessness once and for all. Well, actually by now I'm almost obsessed with locking up the door. But there's one thing I still wonder about. What triggered the motion detecting light that night? It happened probably about 5-6 years ago. It was an early autumn night with a full moon. I'm an architectural engineer, and at the time I worked into late night every day because of a big project on a tight schedule. That night too, I finished work at 3 in the morning and took a taxi back home. When I got off the taxi, somebody walked over to me and bumped to my side. Already exhausted after a long day, I had no patience left and pushed the guy back with a "What the fuck?" He seemed clearly intoxicated. He grumbled something unintelligible and crossed the road on red light in staggering drunkard steps. I just spat more swears under my breath, lighted a cigarette, and waited for the signal to change at the crosswalk. It turned to green light and I barely stepped forward when a taxi suddenly drove over to the crosswalk, blocking my way. I realized it was the very taxi I used. "What are you doing? Have I done something wrong?" I said. The driver's response was not what I expected.
"Oi, mister, don't cross."
"Why the heck not?" I shouted with patience running out.
"Just don't if you want to live,"
driver shouted back.
"Are you nuts or what?"
To my increasingly angry response, the driver suddenly lowered his voice.
"That guy who bumped into you, he's standing over there, and I think he has something in his hand."
I looked across the road, and just as the driver said, the guy was peeping over here, half hidden at the corner, and something shining in his hand. Is that a knife?" Now I too whispered.
"I told you. I noticed something was off with him and been watching on,"
driver said. I thanked him before he drove away. Now, I didn't cross the road and lighted another cigarette, trying to look nonchalant but not losing the sight of the guy at the same time. He waited on a good while longer and finally seemed moving away before I finished the third cigarette. I took a long way round and ran all the way back home. I don't know who that guy was and what he wanted from me, but were it not for the taxi driver and his great gut feeling, I might have very well got stabbed on my back that night. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I talked about gut feeling, but actually I'm one of those modern people who believe things would be largely fine and safe. My pretty boring lifestyle, hardly ever take a wild venture, get drunk, or travel around, have largely saved me from facing unexpected situations, I think. Have you had any close call experience as in today's stories yourself? And do you trust your gut feelings in such situations? Let us know in the comment. If you enjoyed my work, please leave it a comment and a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to my channel for more amusing stories from Korea. If you'd like more direct support, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account, the link's in the description. I'm always grateful for your support in whichever form. I'll come back next Sunday. Until then, stay safe and take care.